All right. Are we ready to proceed? Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to this online hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the City of Ottawa. The Committee of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial tribunal appointed by City Council to make decisions on certain types of applications under the Planning Act. My name is John Blatherwick and I will be chairing this hearing today. Along with me are my fellow panel members, Bonnie Elk-Charon, Stan Wilder, Heather McLean, and Michael Wildman. Please take note that this video conference is being live streamed on YouTube. The video will be archived along with today's agenda on the city's website. Before we begin, we have a few items to outline for your information. While the issues surrounding development in the city are broad, our mandate is quite limited. The committee cannot consider aspects of the proposal that are not related to the required variances: noise, pollution, property maintenance, property values, prosecution for illegal construction, personal comments regarding neighbors, agents, or applicants, additional variances without proper public notice. If there is an identified need for an additional variance or variances, including an increase in the extent of a requested variance, a recirculation of the application is required. As part of the statutory public notification requirements, each applicant was required to post a sign on the property and file a statutory declaration confirming the sign posting. And with the exception of item 8, which we have already heard from last hearing, I am going to have to administer the oath to all agents and or applicants regarding public notification. Regarding quorum, if this is lost during the hearing due to technical difficulties, the proceedings will be paused to allow time for the resolution of the issue. Failing the ability to reinstate quorum, hearing of the items remaining will resume at the outset of the next regularly scheduled meeting of the committee. In terms of the hearing process, listed on the agenda and appearing on the screen are the applications we will hear today. For the sake of efficiency, the committee may deal with agenda items in a different order. Note that the committee members have reviewed the application materials prior to this hearing and any written submissions received in support or in opposition. In addition, the committee will hear today oral submissions from any interested parties as part of our proceedings. The committee may ask for a brief presentation by the applicant, followed by questions from the members where clarification may be needed. The public submissions portion of the hearing will then begin, and any interested parties will be invited to make their submissions to the committee. Panel members may then ask follow-up questions where added clarification may be required. When you are called upon to provide your comments, we ask you to do the following. Start with stating your name and municipal address for the record. We may ask you to spell your name. Then begin your submission by addressing your comments to the panel members. You may ask questions, but please direct them only to the chair. Please limit your comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at the committee's discretion. Once all interested parties have had an opportunity to address the panel, the public submissions portion of the hearing will then be closed. The committee will then make an oral decision to either grant or deny the application. The committee may also choose to reserve its decision. In such case, the panel will deliberate further on the evidence presented immediately following adjournment of the public hearing. In either case, the committee will send within 10 days of its decision, and to all the parties and those who have requested it, a written notice of decision that sets out the reasons for the decision. All decisions of the committee are subject to a 20-day appeal period, during which the decision can be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal for a fee. Before we begin, are there any declarations of interest from any of the members regarding items on this for this panel today, or panel 2 or panel 3? No? Okay. We don't have any minutes to confirm, so we can move on to adjournment requests. We have one today. And the adjournment request is for items 2 and 3 on the agenda. Consent and minor variance applications to subdivide a property into 2 separate parcels to construct a new 2-story detached dwelling on one parcel with variances for reduced lot areas and setbacks. And this adjournment request has come from the planning department. Is the planner there to articulate the request?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did initially have concerns with the application, and we've been working with the applicant. He has addressed most of the city's concerns, but in doing so, we've added an additional variance to the application.
And I believe there's also a request for an updated tree information report.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And we've received revised plans dated June 13th.
Yes.
Okay. So there's one more variance. And what's that variance for, Mr. Hamilton?
I believe it's a rear yard setback.
Okay. All right.
Staff have not reviewed to confirm yet, though. Apologies.
Okay, that's fine. Is the agent or the applicant there, please?
I'm here, but I cannot see. I don't have a video picture, but my name is Joseph Vahidi.
Okay, your address for the record, please, sir.
My mailing address is 432 Lochaber Avenue, Ottawa, Ontario, K2A 086.
You're aware of the plan. You're aware of the planning department's request to adjourn this hearing until such time as they recirculate because there is an additional variance needed.
Yes, yes, Chairman. Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yeah.
Okay. And you're also, I think you're also aware of the fact that the forestry department wants an updated tree information report.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I think we had also had a neighborhood resident, Mr. Thiessen, who'd like to speak to the committee regarding the adjournment. Is he there?
Yes, I am here.
Mr. Thiessen, to the adjournment, please.
Yes, my name is Rod Thiessen at 304 Atlantis Avenue. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I've asked that this property minor variance be adjourned due to due to the width of the building and its overall its side yard setbacks. They're inconsistent with other recent builds in the area. And
Mr. Thiessen, we're only speaking to the adjournment.
Yes.
Not to the merits of the case.
Okay. I do request that it be adjourned.
Okay. Well, the department wishes that to be so. The applicant's agent has agreed to it. So I guess what we shall do is we shall adjourn this application sine die, given the fact that there is more variances needed and a new tree information report needs to be provided to the forestry department. Mr. Wilder, you had a comment or question? Can't hear you, Mr. Wilder.
To Mr. Vahidi, Mr. Vahidi, clearly there's some concern by adjacent property owners to your application. I've got some concerns as well. You might wish to speak with your neighbors. I'm not sure if you've actually met with them. I'm not sure if you met with the community association or not, but I would strongly encourage you before the next meeting to meet with the community association and to meet with the residents so we can get a better feel of their position and how you may be able to try and compromise on your application based on their concerns. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Wilder. Ms. Lasso from the Westboro Beach Community Association, I believe, also wished to speak to the adjournment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We have not heard from any of the neighbors, so I would strongly encourage them to be in touch with us as soon as possible.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Lasso. All right. With that, all in favor of adjourning this application sine die, as there is another variance identified by the department? All right. Adjournment's in, the application is adjourned sine die. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to the regular agenda. second here, folks. And the first item we'll deal with is item number 1 on the agenda, 5 Cobalt Avenue. This is a minor variance application to permit an increased front yard setback and reduced rear yard setback for a new 3-story detached dwelling. We note that there is a excuse me, revised site plan filed with the city and the committee June 10th, 2022. And to that, Mr. Hamilton, are you there?
Sorry, Miss Linker is 5 Cobalt.
Okay. So the department's comments regarding this application now that a revised site plan has been filed.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff have no concerns with the proposed front yard setback as it aligns with the average of the abutting lots. It is an improvement from the existing front yard setback conditions, and it's consistent with the character of the neighborhood. However, staff have concerns with the proposed rear yard setback. The proposed rear yard setback is not a common condition and deviates from the character of Cobalt Avenue. So staff have concerns with the resulting.
Okay. Oh, she's frozen. I think we have the gist of the department's concerns with this application. The agent for the applicant, I believe, is one of the owners, Mr. Webster. Is he there?
Hi, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'm here.
All right. For the record, your address, please, Mr. Webster.
My address is 5 Cobalt Avenue, Ottawa, Ontario, K1S 3S7.
Okay. Before we begin, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do.
All right. All right, Mr. Webster, you've heard the department's position regarding your revised site plan. If you'd like to make a presentation, please.
Yes, absolutely. Do you have my presentation or do I share that with you now?
We have it and we can share it.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. First and foremost, thank you very much for reviewing these variances with me. I'm here today presenting this on behalf of myself, my wife Laura, and my 3 children. To go over this, I mean, overall, if you can go to the next slide. Sorry. Yeah. So just to review the 2 variances that we're requesting, and there's the one for the front yard setback. We'd like it to be at 4.8 meters. The city calls for a maximum of 3 meters. So that's a difference of 1.8 meters in the front. The rear yard setback, we're asking for 6.89 when the city wants 8.23. So we've met a 25% lot depth and the city would like 30%. That's a difference of 1.34 meters. Go to the next slide, please. To go into a little bit more in depth on the variance at the front of the yard, the first request of the 6 houses on the east side of the street on Cobalt Avenue, none of those meet the 3 meter requirement for the front yard setback. By doing so, if we were to do the 3 meters, we would be the furthest house out on the street. I think the city would agree with this, as they said that what we're proposing here to be equidistant between the house to the north and the south of us puts us in a good place, makes us align better with the character and the best streetscape we can possible. To go to the next slide, please. Variance request number 2. This is for the rear yard. We believe that the difference of 1.3 meters is minor. It's about 4.5 feet. The house located at 3 Cobalt and 11 Cobalt actually have a rear yard setback that's less, that's less than 30% as well. So what we're requesting, an excerpt from the gentleman and the family just south of us at 9 Cobalt Avenue writes this: we're also in support of the minor variance to extend the back of the proposed house. This will not affect our light. Their house is to the north, and will bring the back of their house in line with the additions on the back of 3 and 11 Cobalt. You go to the next slide, please. So addressing the concerns from the city, and we've been working well with them, and it's been an actual pleasure to work with them. So they've been helping us out. But in terms of the one concern they do have with the rear yard, we had a planner, sorry, not a planner. We had a surveyor go over the area and look at some of the rear yard setbacks within the area surrounding us. So like I mentioned before, 3 and 11 Cobalt have a rear yard setback of 7.27 meters and 6 meters. We're requesting right in and around there, right? So as well on 5 Clemo, 1 Clemo, and 508 O'Connor, their yard setbacks are also less as well. So we didn't see that this was necessarily not common in the area. We thought that it actually was quite common. When you stand in our backyard and look down the houses in each way, you can see the houses that are further out. And it doesn't look strange or odd. I don't believe that this will affect any privacy or light or shadows or anything like that, as noted before in the previous comment from our neighbor to the south. You can go to the next slide. This is from Anna O'Sullivan Volbeck. This is the note from Ed Herware, the surveyor that looked over our property and the properties on the street and the surrounding area. Go to the next slide, please. So applying the 4 tests. I know this has been laid out in the application in the letter that we've sent previously, so I'll go through this quickly. But are the variances minor in nature? We definitely believe that they are. 1.8 meters and 1.3 meters. It's about 4.5 feet. We don't think these will make any material differences on the street. We actually think that it will be much nicer for the street, doing the right thing for the neighbors and ourselves. We've discussed this with the community associations, with the neighbors, and they're all in agreement with this. Number 2, are the variances appropriate and desirable for the neighborhood? Again, yes, we believe that they are. We believe that we've designed and are trying to build a new home that fits the character of the neighborhood. Absolutely, it's a Tudor design, as you have seen on the first slide of this, and the design is there right now as a Tudor design home as well. So we're trying to stay within that same type of thing, and the placement on the lot is the same as well. In terms of the next 2, I know I'll be running out of time very quickly, but these are laid out further in the letter that we shared with you. If you can go to the next one as well. Next slide, sorry. And this just shows the character analysis. We did a streetscape analysis not too long ago when that was submitted. I think, as you can see, I mean, these are the houses on the street, and you can see how far they are set back. Sorry, it might be a little bit small, but our design is in line. Like I said, it's a Tudor style home on the site now. We're trying to get a Tudor style home there again. And our layout, our site layout is intended again to fit the street's aesthetic, to be able to have a porch on the front. And it's really the overall aesthetic of the glebe and what we're trying to design here. So, it's in our view that these variances are quite minor. We're trying to do what's right for the neighborhood, what's right for the neighbors, what's right for our family. We believe that we've spoken to the right community associations, the planners, the zoning folks, etc. Thank you very much for reviewing this with us. We hope you'll be supportive of these requests.
Any questions for the presenter, for Mr. Webster, the members of the committee? We also have Mr. Bainan on 1 Cobalt Avenue who would like to speak to this application.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Andrew Bainan, B-E-Y-N-O-N. It's no problem. Number 1.
Look at the spelling of my last name.
I've been through this all my life.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Residential address, indeed, 1 Cobalt Avenue, Ottawa, Ontario, K1S3S7. We sent in a formal letter to indicate our support for this proposal. And I just wanted to add for the consideration of the committee members that I agree strongly with everything that Mr. Webster has raised with you today. We believe that this proposal is in line with the houses that are in this particular area. And as regards the rear setback, I think it's fair to say, having lived here for a long time, there are considerable variances with the older houses which are along this street. So the placement of the rear of the building is not going to cause a disruption to the neighbors. Also, I think it's fair to say that generally speaking, our houses along this street have smaller windows or limited to none windows at the rear of the properties, and much more focus on the front, including the porches. So when you visit with folks in this neighborhood, we tend to be in contact with each other much more through the front than through the rear areas. There's also division of the properties that back on O'Connor and on Cobalt with fences. So the privacy issues are driven in a way that reflects the jumble of the older houses, and the siting of this one as it is proposed, I don't think would cause any concern whatsoever, certainly not to us as neighbors in this neighborhood.
Thank you very much. We note that there are no objections from neighbors that have been received. So as far as you're concerned, Mr. Webster, the rear yard variance is appropriate, given the wide range of rear yard depths that you've shown us on your materials.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. All right. Questions or comments, the members of the committee? All right. Okay, so I'm just looking through here to see. There are no conditions being requested by the department or any of the agencies. All right, so prepared to vote on this, ladies and gentlemen. All in favor of the application as revised and presented to us? Good luck with your project. Are you any relation, by the way, to any architects named Webster?
Not that I know of. Maybe.
Okay.
Not that I know of, though. No.
I was just curious.
Yeah. Okay.
The style. I was looking at the style of the house.
Okay,
All right.
Good.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Good luck with your project.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you to the committee.
You're very welcome. Thank you for your
Thank you,
input,
Mr.
sir. All right. Next application we'll deal with today is item number 4, 12 West Crestland Road. And this is a minor variance application to permit an increase in the footprint and an increase in the height for a new coach house proposed for this property. And the agent for the applicant, your name and address for the record, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Kasia Olszewska. My address is 2611 Queensview Drive, Suite 300 in Ottawa.
Okay. Before we begin, Ms. Olszewska, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do.
All right. So this is an application to increase the size and the height of an as of right coach house for this home on Crestland Road. So please proceed with your application presentation.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to review the application with me. My name is Kasia Olszewska, and I'm representing the client from WSP. Next slide, please. So just a brief overview, the site is located to the south of West Preston Road in the Overbrook neighborhood. Next slide, please. This is a Google Street View image of the single detached dwelling and the garage at the rear yard of the property. Next slide, please. And the proposed site plan. So the orientation should be shifted 90 degrees, but just to fit it better on the slide, I oriented it this way. So you have the existing 2-story detached dwelling and 2-story detached garage in the rear yard. The proposal is to remove the existing garage in order to better accommodate the proposed coach house. And a note, the location of the proposed coach house was actually relocated to accommodate the critical root zone to be located well outside of the critical root zone of any trees on the property. Next slide, please. Following are some architectural renderings of the proposed coach home. So it's in style, massing, and character of the adjacent developments surrounding the property. Next slide, please. So here we have the elevations from the north side, south side. Next slide, please. As well as the east and west sides. Next slide, please. Just a quick overview of the planning framework for this application. It's located within the general urban area of the old official plan and within the inner urban transit and neighborhood designation of the new official plan. It is zoned R4UC within the zoning bylaw, and it is within the mature neighborhood overlay. Next slide, please. The two minor variances the applicant is applying for is to permit an increased footprint of 80 square meters for the proposed coach house, whereas the zoning bylaw permits a maximum of 50 square meters, where the principal dwelling has a footprint of 125 square meters or less. The second variance being to permit an increased height of 4.47 meters, whereas the proposed coach house whereas the bylaw permits maximum height of 3.6 meters for a coach house. Next slide, please. Just to address the four tests, are the minor variances minor? Yes, the minor increase in the permitted footprint area of the coach house is minimum relative to the existing garage and principal dwelling. This will have a minor effect on the existing garage, which would be replaced with a similar structure and a similar building footprint. The privacy of the abutting properties would not be impacted due to the existing partial hedge along the western property line and sufficient setbacks from the adjacent property lines. And the increased height would not impact the existing character of the area streetscape, as the proposed coach house is located within the rear yard of the property. Number two, are the variances desirable for the appropriate development or use of the property? Yes, they are desirable and appropriate. The coach house is similar in both form, scale, and massing to the existing detached garage. Next slide, please. And it would not result in encroachment of the existing rear yard or require the removal of trees, as I mentioned before. The existing driveway would be utilized to lead up to the coach home, and it's compatible with the adjacent two-story developments in all directions. Number three, Number three, do the variances maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? Yes, they do. So the coach houses are permitted on lots containing another type of dwelling, as on this site. The R4 zone does allow a number of other residential uses to provide additional housing choices. Just a very quick note, the coach house will be inhabited by the family members of the property owner. The proposed coach house does comply with all the requirements of the zoning bylaw, except for the building height and footprint. And the proposed development is compatible with the existing land use pattern of the adjacent properties, as I mentioned, of the residential character of the neighborhood. Next slide, please. And finally, do the minor variances maintain the general intent of the official plan? Yes, they do. As I mentioned already, it's similar in build form, scale, and massing to the existing dwellings in all directions. It would utilize the existing driveway. It's compatible with the development surrounding the area and the greater neighborhood, and it does maintain the general intent and purpose of the new and old official plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wojcicka. We also have Mr. Sim on the list of speakers. Is he going to speak to this as well?
Mr. Chair, he's not present. He was also acting agent for this application as well.
Okay. And we have the property owner also on our list of speakers. Ms. Paul, is she there?
Apologies, Mr. Chair. They are also not online.
Okay, that's fine. All right, thank you very much for your presentation. I believe there's some questions from members regarding the variances. Ms. Oak-Charon, I think you had some concerns.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if you can tell us why it is impossible to comply with the bylaw, given that this is a brand new build. Because while I'm very supportive of coach houses, I am wondering, why does it have to be oversized in this case, given that it's a brand new build?
So the reason for the larger footprint size is to accommodate the kitchen and living space within the coach home. Kind of have a comfortable space for the family members.
To also address the height issue?
Yes, so for the height, it's because it's a 2-level coach home. So there's a basement level and then the first story level. And in order to accommodate that, there's an increase in height required. And it's also in partly due to the roof detail. It's a sloping roof. So that's the peaked roof really adds extra height to the required minor variance.
So does that mean that it's primarily cosmetic as opposed to functional?
So yeah, there's 2 factors. First, it being 2-level, that the basement is going to be utilized. And then the second one is cosmetic, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilder, you had questions, comments? Not Mr. Wilder, sorry, Mr. Wildman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I understand correctly, one of the things that's driving the height is the fact that it's sitting on a foundation and not a pad, and in order to get a basement in place, that's driving things up a little bit. So you'll need windows and the likes. Can you tell me what is, in the surrounding area, what is the average height of the units in the neighborhood?
The surrounding height is about 4.2 meters, I believe. So this is slightly more.
So would this actually be higher than the house that's on the property now?
It's almost the same in height. I don't have the exact number, but it would not be taller than the existing home, no.
Okay, so it's similar.
Yes, very similar.
And you indicated that in order to get a kitchen and living space, you needed to add another 30 square meters.
Correct, yes.
So you're saying that you can't have a kitchen and living space within the 50 square meters? Like what, I guess I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to get to where what you're saying.
Yes, in order to have a comfortable accommodations for the family members, the client would really prefer that increase in space, correct?
Okay, so it's a preference is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Chair, those are my questions. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Well. Regarding the use of the basement, is that going to be storage space, HVAC space, bedrooms?
It's mostly going to be storage space, yes.
Mostly?
Yes.
Any bedrooms going to
And
be on there?
of course, HVAC as well.
There won't be any bedrooms in the basement?
No.
How many bedrooms on the ground floor?
1 bedroom.
1 bedroom. All right, okay. Any other questions from the committee on this? Ms. McLean.
Just on that last note, the cover letter does indicate that there would be 2 bedrooms and a living and dining space on the main floor and another bedroom as well as recreational space in the basement. So I'm a bit, I just maybe have that clarified again. And the other concern I have is that the placement of the coach house, and that may not be before us, but due to the irregular shape of the lot, the placement of the coach house is right behind the house at 20 Westland Pressland Road, rather than behind the existing house. And so that concerns me a little on that. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McLean. Any further comments from the agent? No.
Yes, so there was a revised site plan for the 2 bedrooms on the top floor and the recreational space. That's correct, the basement. And in terms of the setback from the adjacent developments, so they are actually facing the backyards of the adjacent properties, and the setbacks are sufficient. They are not being reduced. And there's hedges, I believe, on most of the property lines. Therefore, privacy will not be affected.
Okay. Mr. Wildman, further comment?
Just so that I understand correctly, based on what Ms. McLean said, for the record, is it 1 or 2 bedrooms on the ground floor?
2 bedrooms.
And is there a bedroom in the basement?
Recreational space.
No bedroom in the basement?
No.
Okay, our decision will likely speak to that. I just want to be sure of that. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything further from the members of the committee? I think what we'll do is reserve on this application, and you'll receive our decision in 10 days. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next application for the committee are items 5 and 6 on the agenda. 176 Carlton Avenue. And these are consent and minor variance applications to subdivide the property into 2 parcels of land for the construction of a new semi-detached dwelling with reduced lot widths and areas. The applicant's agent is Mr. Miller. Is he there?
So good afternoon, Mr. Chair, it's Murray Chown. Mr. Miller is off sick today, so I will be making the presentation this afternoon with respect to this application.
Okay. Before we begin, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do.
All right. Please proceed, Mr. Chum.
So if the coordinator would could put up our presentation materials, please. Thank you very much. If we go to the next slide. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, the location of this application will be well known to most members of the committee. It's located in Champlain Park in Kitchissippi Ward, in close proximity to Tunney's Pasture and Westboro Beach, a neighborhood that's been subject to some fairly intensive pressures for intensification. Next slide, please. The subject site is located on the west side of Carlton Avenue, just south of Clearview Avenue. It has a frontage on Carlton of 15.28 meters and an area of approximately 464 square meters. It is a fairly typical lot for Carlton Avenue. Next slide, please. Chair, members of the committee, this is the draft reference plan that's been filed with the application. Shows the proposed severances with part 1 to the north and part 2 to the south. Next slide, please. This is the first of the 2 consent sketches that were filed with the application. Shows the proposed severed lot, the northerly lot, with an area of approximately 232 square meters and frontage on Carlton of 762 meters. Next slide, please. This is the second consent sketch. It's just a mirror image of the previous sketch. Once again, the proposed southerly lot will have an area of 232 square meters and frontage on Carlton Avenue of 7.6 meters. Next slide, please. So, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, is typical for many applications that you have seen before on Carlton Avenue in Champlain Park. There are 2 variances required associated with each of the proposed lots. One is to reduce the minimum lot width from 9 meters to 7.6. And the second variance is to reduce the required lot area from 270 square meters to 232.2 square meters. Next slide, please. So, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, to go to the tests for the minor variances. First test is well known to the members, is whether or not the variances maintain the general purpose and intent of the official plan. This property or this neighborhood is designated general urban area in the in-force official plan and is designated neighborhood in the council adopted official plan. Both of those designations encourage infill and intensification in the well-established low-density residential neighborhoods in the urban area. So the variances which will facilitate the intensification of the subject site maintains the general purpose and intent of both the in-force official plan and the council adopted official plan. The second test is whether or not the minor variances maintain the general purpose and intent of the zoning bylaw. The property is in the R2 zone, which clearly permits semi-detached dwellings, so that the variances which facilitate the development of a semi-detached dwelling on this property maintains the general intent of the permitted uses of the zoning bylaw. I think it's also important to point out that the proposed development will conform to all of the other performance standards of the zoning bylaw, including front yard setback, rear yard setback, interior side yard setbacks, and building height. And most importantly, I think for many people in the neighborhood, the requirement for soft landscaping in the front yard. This image also indicates that the proposed severance is consistent with the number of severances in the neighborhood, including the property immediately to the north, properties across the street immediately south of Clearview Avenue, and just kitty corner across the street as well. And as you go further south on Carlton Avenue, you'll see more severances to permit semis identical to what's being proposed today. Next slide, please. So to the test as to whether or not the severances are appropriate for the development of land, we're all very familiar with this neighborhood, but just to reiterate, the subject site is within 900 meters of the LRT station at Tunney's Pasture and the planned LRT station at Westboro. It is also a comfortable walk from Richmond Road with a multitude of commercial, public, and institutional uses. So the intensification of this property and the variances that facilitate the intensification of the property are, in our opinion, appropriate for the development of the land. Lastly, for the test of minor, that test is measured against impact, and in particular, I would suggest to the committee that the proposed variances will have no impact on the streetscape. The proposed development is similar to, if not identical to, a number of other developments along the street, including the development of the semi-detached dwelling immediately to the north. The buildings will, or the proposed development will respect the front yard setback along the street, so that the development will certainly maintain that streetscape. As I've indicated already, the development will respect all other provisions of the zoning bylaw, including front yard, interior side yard, rear yard, and height, and most importantly, the soft landscaping requirement in the front yard. It's our opinion, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, that the minor variances meet the 4 tests under the Act. We would ask you to approve the variances, and with respect to the consent applications, offer you the opinion that the consent applications also meet the criteria under 5124 under the Planning Act, and most importantly, the requirement for the consent applications to maintain or to conform with the official plan. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chown. You're aware of the conditions that the department is requesting? Cash in
Yes, I
lieu
am.
parkland, tree planting plan, existing dwelling removed and services capped, independent services, accessory structure demolished or relocated, development agreement, asphalt overlay, an agreement regarding the active railway line, which would be the LRT line, and a joint use and maintenance agreement.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we're aware of the conditions and have no comments or questions on the conditions.
Okay. The planning department, Mr. Wilder, you had a question or comment?
Mr. Chown, can I see a streetscape, please, of the proposed development?
I don't have a streetscape. Did you want an elevation front? I can share a front elevation of the building.
I was just curious to see how this fits in with the streetscape. You know, I mean, lot area, I'd like just to see how the rest of the street looks in terms of the impact this may have in terms of if we can just put something up on the screen that you can show us.
So this is an image of the proposed semi-detached dwelling, which is fairly typical of the semi-detached dwellings that have been constructed on the street. Mr. Wilder, I don't have a streetscape plan or illustration, and that's with respect because the application before you deals with the creation of 2 lots, and the OLT and the Ontario Municipal Board have made it quite clear that in dealing with applications for severances and lot creations where we're not seeking minor variances related to the structure itself, the only test is whether or not the lots are consistent with the lot fabric. And we've provided a figure in our presentation and in our materials that illustrates that the proposed lots are identical to many lots on the street that exist today.
I see. Have you had any indication, have you spoken to the abutting property owners at all regarding this development, notwithstanding the nature of the variances, to see if they have support, any concern with this application?
Absolutely. Our clients have reached out to both neighbors immediately to the north and the south. They have a very good relationship with them. They met with the neighbors to the north as recently as Monday, just a few days ago. So to the best of my knowledge, the neighbors have no concerns. To the best of my knowledge, there have been no comments submitted to the committee from the neighbors with respect to the applications, and I don't believe that any neighbors are here to speak to the application.
And correct. Last point, you're aware of the comment from our forester with regards to one tree, of course, not, I gather it's not in declining condition, but the second tree, I guess, is going to be removed. Is that correct? A healthy tree? I realize it's within the as of right footprint, so it can be removed. What is replacing it? Any new trees on the site?
I appreciate the question. The staff report notes that with the removal of that tree and also I'll say a sickly tree at the front of the property, that our clients will have an obligation to provide 6 compensation trees. There is certainly going to be room to plant 2 trees at the front and at least 2 more at the back. If they can't plant all 6 on the property, then they will provide a financial compensation to the city for what trees they aren't able to plant on the tree, on the property. But that concern is addressed in the condition that staff have requested with respect to a tree planting plan, and I can assure the committee that at least 4 more trees will be planted as compensation for the loss of those 2 trees.
Thank you for that.
Mr. Wilder, we also have Heather Pearl from the Champlain Park Community Association. I think on the list and wish to speak to the matter.
Hi, Heather Pearl, 251 Keyworth Avenue in Champlain Park in Ottawa. And we had the opportunity to have a site visit to discuss the application. Not having access to the elevations is a bit of an issue for us because we like to be able to review them. I know it's not going to happen with Novatech, but we have had cases in the past where elevations have really needed a lot of work before they could meet the zoning bylaw. But in this case, I trust that Novatech knows what it's doing. In any case, we have no issue with the severance, the minor variances for area and width. We usually, there's just no problem with that here. It's the way the neighborhood has gone over the past 13 years. We do have a number of things that we made public in our submission regarding what has to be taken care of with the neighbors, because one of the things that happen in these old neighborhoods is that houses are not built necessarily in a way that work with sort of established GPS determined surveys. And so you can have houses right on the boundary, you can have garages and eaves and things overhanging. And we've seen that in a number of cases in this neighborhood. And I know of some that will be a problem in the future for future builders. But it's very important when developing to ensure that you protect those properties, which I guess the old term was grandfathered. I don't know what the new one is, but grandfathered properties need to be protected. There's issues regarding slumping of materials into the excavation. So it's probably going to be very important for some kind of shoring to be done here. And builders really do have to understand that they have 4-foot setbacks. They do not need to bite into the neighbor's property. And if they properly shored the excavations, that would take care of those problems. I didn't know about the forestry's concerns regarding the tree. And so I just have a few questions that came to me this morning. And it's not a deal breaker or anything, but I do want to know from Novatech's point of view, a few things. How much space would be needed to preserve the maple tree's root system? Could a design that offsets the two sides of the semi such that the north unit is set forward on the lot to line up with the neighbor to the north work? We did this before for another build at 235, 237 Carlton to preserve a large oak tree. If the north unit ends up being too small, if it's too small to live in if the tree is preserved, what about making the north unit 2.5 stories and the south unit 2? I can think of some pretty cool design features that might result from something like that, and even would provide more interior light and ventilation to both semis. And so because we haven't seen any elevations, we're sort of assuming that the design isn't 100% final. And so if there's nothing that the COA needs to tie their approval to, would a potential redesign work? It's a question. I have no direct knowledge. I just want to know if that is a possibility.
Mr. Chow?
Save the tree.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to respond. Could I ask the committee coordinator to put up slide 11 from our presentation package, please? Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, this is a figure which clearly illustrates the critical root zone for the tree at the back of the property. That's the lower circle. What's outlined in blue is the as of right footprint for either a single family home or a semi-detached dwelling. The tree is actually located 6 inches away from the building. The critical root zone would take up almost 50% of the buildable area for the northerly unit. It simply cannot be saved or protected with an as of right development on this property. We wouldn't be here if it was a single family home. The footprint, as I say, for the single family home and the semi-detached is identical. That tree simply is not going to survive redevelopment of this property. The critical root zone extends far too far into that as of right building footprint.
Thank you, Mr. Chown. Is Ms. Young there? Can she possibly comment for forestry?
Hi there. Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. The reason I'd raised that point is just kind of adding on to Ms. Pearl's information that there have been creative designs elsewhere. There may be a way to do it. I don't have the information on how far away the build would need to be from the tree. It is a long shot, and that's why I did not make this a condition or anything. It would take definite creativity, and there would certainly be impacts to the root zone, but it's just something that I was hoping would be looked at and considered, especially given that the tree in the front is not healthy enough to retain. We were really hoping to retain that one, but given that it isn't, I was just hoping to see something a little bit more on, what options there would be to retain that rear tree.
Mr. Chair, if I may, we also do have a tree information report from an expert who has indicated that that tree cannot be saved. And that was shared with the committee and with Ms. Pearl and with Ms. Young.
Yes, we have that report. Any questions or comments to the applicant, members of the panel? Any further comments, Mr. Chown?
I'm fine, thank you. Once again, I'd encourage the committee to approve the application since filed.
Are we prepared to vote on this, or does anyone wish to reserve?
No.
Right. Right, then in the matter of 176 Carlton Avenue, consents and minor variances. All in favor of the application as presented? Right. Your application's approved. Good luck with your project.
Thank you very much.
Next application on the agenda. Item number 7. This is a consent application to subdivide a property into 2 parcels of land for separate ownerships of an existing semi-detached dwelling. And the agent for the property owners is Amanda. Is she there?
I am, thank you.
All right, before we begin, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do.
Okay. So this semi is up and constructed and occupied?
Correct.
All right. All right. I think one of our members had a question regarding our plan. Ms. McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There seems to be an alcove between the front halves of the new semi, and I just wondered, there's no request for an easement or right of way I'm not sure if you have a photo there that you could show us, or how will that be maintained?
So that's going to be dealt with through our lawyer through a shared joint maintenance agreement. So that was one of the conditions that was identified by the department that we are aware of and will be bringing forward with our lawyer.
So your solicitor doesn't feel that you need an easement right away?
That hasn't been flagged or identified, no. But once we have the approval to move forward from the committee, we'll be having those discussions with our solicitor.
Yeah. How wide is that gap, just out of curiosity?
I believe it's 2.5 feet.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a linked semi-detached unit. So that's the one adjoining common wall between the two dwellings.
Okay. All right. You're aware, Mr. Dick, of the conditions, the cash in lieu of parkland.
Yes.
Has that been paid by any chance?
Yeah. So that was all part of our initial submission for our building permit. Yeah. So those have all been along with the tree application as well.
Yeah. So you've already paid the cash in lieu?
Yes.
Okay. So we could probably remove that as a condition since you've already satisfied it. Building code services, a 1-hour fire separation, confirmation, tree planting plan, independent services confirmed, noise level agreements, and the joint use and maintenance includes that space between the two houses. Okay. Okay. Any questions or comments from the committee members on this application? I note that the department has no concerns, and I am assuming that from forestry's comments that that an agreed upon tree planting plan has been put in place. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
At the forest, we have a work order underway to replace the amber maple that was removed from that location. So we'll be putting that tree back in. That's going to be planted this summer.
Okay. Okay. All right. With that, no further questions. Mr. Hamilton?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, to interject. Could I ask the applicant if the amount that was paid was for cash in lieu of parkland or if it was for a different development charge at the building permit stage?
Oh, I'll have to take that away and confirm if that's something that we can bring back to the table. I do know that we did pay development charges up front, but I don't know if the cash in lieu of parkland has been. I assume that it would have been since all the permits were issued and released, but if
maybe in an abundance of caution, we'll just leave that as a condition, Mr. Hamilton.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I may, could we leave it in? We could even reword it to say that if proof is provided, we can clear it that way as well.
Okay, so we'll amend that text. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All right, then. With that, all in favor of granting this this application for severance? Your application's approved.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. The next application we'll deal with on the agenda today is item number 8, 86 James Street. And this application is back to us, I guess, for the third time. We had a April 20th, June the 1st, and is now back before us again. I think Ms. Smith is the applicant's agent on this app, I believe. Yeah, Ms. Smith.
Good afternoon.
The last time we dealt with this, several members were missing.
Yes.
So to help them understand the complexity of this issue, I think it's best to go through the presentation again. So
Sounds good. we're ready.
Okay.
First slide,
I'd like
please.
to- And we note that the planning department is still in opposition to the application. That hasn't changed. And I just, I sincerely hope that you have a schematic that shows the parking space dimensions as we asked for the last time we met, because it was somewhat unclear as to where cars
Yes.
parked and where front steps went. So please proceed, Ms. Smith.
Right, so we're here to approve the front yard parking space. It was installed just after not long after the owners bought the property. They had some renovations done, and they received the order before they moved in, and they have not been parking there since they received that order. So the intention is to park similarly to what you see next door. And they saw what's going on the street, and they were matching the pattern that you can see on the street that I will be showing to you. And so, next slide, please. The property is between Kent, Lyons, Somerset, and Gladstone, and these houses were developed in the early 19th and 20th centuries with inadequate parking, and over 30 front yard parking spaces have been established and legalized throughout the 2000s. Next slide, please. We received many letters of support and no complaints since the application was submitted. Next slide, please. The first image on the left is again 84 James, the neighboring property. And they're one of the approved front yard parking spaces. There's another one is 896. It has a widened driveway, which is another common feature on the street. And another common feature is a block laneway, as you see on the next one on 94. And 111, the image on the right, is a block of apartments at the west end of this block that has a few parking spaces in front of their building. Next slide, please. The residents of 86 James are part of a large multi-generational family with 2 working parents, 3 young children, one of whom is disabled. The family has a high traffic frequency between 3 to 5 times a day due to the children, schooling, and medical appointments and other daily needs. Traffic in the rear yard has raised concern over safety, as does the on-street parking. The existing walkway was widened to bring the car closer to the front entrance and ease up on the pickup and drop-off for the aging and disabled members of the family. It also allows for future wheelchair access. In the back, 86, 84, 82, and 80 James all share the rear parking space, and it's difficult parking. Next slide, please. The yellow on the survey plan shows the right-of-way. At the bottom, it turns into a fence. So right now, they cannot use their right-of-way. They have to, and also the other people wouldn't be able to park if they use their legal right-of-way. So they have to turn onto the neighbor's property to be able to get into their parking space, which is higher up, just below those steps at the back of the building. So they cannot navigate here without encroaching onto neighbor's property. Next slide, please. So there's less than 2.4 meters given the projections in this laneway of the meters, the electric and the gas meter. Next slide, please. So the right-of-way is where that truck and the white car are. So you can see that you can't really turn into use the right-of-way. 80 James on the left has no access to their own rear yard, and they have an agreement with 82 James to also share their parking. So the the owners at 86 James have no control over future land development agreements or placement of air conditioners, fences, and decking on the neighboring properties. Next slide, please. So this is an image of someone trying to turn out, well, it's their car. The image on the left is facing James Street, and they're backing up into the neighboring property and trying to turn around to leave facing forward. Next slide, please. This slide on the left shows a tree that was damaged in 2021. It had to be removed because of the parking that was on top of its roots. And the picture at the right is 96 rear yard. And you can imagine what a nice amenity space that could be if it wasn't half of a parking area beyond the car. And also those trees at the back would be damaged if the right of way was used. They would have to park on top of the roots of that tree. Next slide, please. You can see the very tight turning radius here at 19 feet 2 inches, and especially the space to back out. And the car would be much more difficult if the car at the side of James Street was a longer car than what I drew here. And now you can see at the front, I've added the more dimensions to the front parking space. So it'll be very similar to the parking space at 84 James. Next slide, please. So there's a number of other advantages to front yard parking. The rear is maintained for landscaping. In fact, the soft landscaping would increase by 50%. The existing trees stay healthy. We met with the city forester on site, and she commented that pavers were installed 2 years ago, and since there's no damage now, the tree will likely stay healthy. And note that the tree is closer to 84 James than to 86. And also the design is symmetric with the existing neighbor. Next slide, please. So this shows the winter scene and more difficult parking. And on-street parking would likely not be permitted, likely that.
Can't hear you. Can anybody hear Ms. Smith? I can't hear you, Ms. Smith.
Sorry, I don't know how I got muted, but there you go. So sorry about that. I wanted to say about the previous slide that there's the zoning strategy pair of April of 2019 allowed front yard parking in the mature neighborhood overlay, in which the parking space is located alongside the interior lot lines and soft landscaping is in the middle of the lot. In the paper, city staff concluded that this front parking arrangement would provide more soft landscaping and would increase the permeability and thus be beneficial for on-site stormwater management. And again, you can see how difficult it would be in the winter months for street parking or rear yard parking with the snow management. Next slide, please. The streetscape character analysis that we did was biased because of the large church on the east side of the property of the block, which otherwise could have homes facing James, which could have had on-street parking. Next slide, please. If the sample group was weighted towards the west, there would be 11 out of 21 spaces with on-street parking, not including 86 James. These properties have front yard parking with depressed curbs, And there are others with simple widened driveways. So 86 James would follow this pattern of front yards mixed with hard and soft landscapes. Next slide, please. These are some of the images of the street, and I could correlate them if you wanted with the numbers. You can see that the cars integrate pretty well with the street. It doesn't seem like the cars dominate because of the lively, interesting, historic architecture. So I believe that, well, next slide, please. This is another slide of images from the street. And the 11 parking spaces that have depressed curves. Next slide, please. So you can see the pattern, widened driveways, blocked rear yards, and front yard parking. So I believe that it meets the 4 tests. They're minor in nature, and it meets the intention. Yeah, do you want me to go through it? It meets, it's minor, it's desirable for the applicant's use, obviously, for their safety, and it's functional, and it meets the intent of the zoning bylaw. And by the way, it's the R4UD zoning and would permit another story and an 8-unit apartment building, which would increase the congestion quite a bit. And it meets the objectives of the official plan that enhance the sense of community by creating and maintaining places with their own distinct identity, and create places that are safe, accessible, and easy to get to and move through, and provide housing that meets the needs of disabled persons, senior citizens, single parent families, and other groups with special needs. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Mr. Wildman, you had a question or comment?
I do, Chair. Thank you. You've convinced me that it would be very difficult to do a proper turnaround if you were to access the back area. I wonder if the committee coordinator could put up the image where you have shown the front with the placement of the vehicle, the theoretical vehicle. So the size of the theoretical vehicle that you're showing practically parked on the stair, what is the length of that?
That's 13'9". It is based on the car that they have. It's a Kia Soul.
All right. So, and assuming that you can squeak right up tight to that step, the nose of that vehicle is not hanging over the property line?
No.
Okay. And then the distance from curb line to the nose of the vehicle or to the property line, that is 10 feet, 5.5 inches?
That is correct.
Okay. If I could have the committee coordinator shift to the image with the snow. Okay, somewhere behind that big snowbank, there will need to be an opening that's 10 feet, 2 inches wide. Is that correct?
That's right. The dimension, yes.
Okay, so where's that snow going to be put? The snow that you're going to have to displace to put a 10-foot, 2-inch wide driveway opening in.
Well, I'm not sure if this is just a snowbank and what's on the other side of the snowbank right now. There's
right. So that's a wind. That's a windrow from a snowplow. That's yes. The snowplow has moved the snow from the road over to the edge as best it can because it's quite tight in that area. So where is that displaced snow that was once in the road and now is along the curb line and probably encroaching into the roadway? Where's it going to go?
Perhaps the owners are here. Derek Armstrong and Lee Song Zhang. are they permitted to respond?
Mhm.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Wildman. Our experience with this past winter is that we had sufficient place in between the homes, the home at 84 James and our home 86 in the soft landscape area to pile a significant amount of snow. We also similarly have a small amount of land to the other side of the interlock area between ourselves and 88 James Street, which would permit us to offset some of that snow.
Okay, but you're gonna have snow in your driveway too. Presumably the snow that's in your driveway also has to be displaced as well in order to park there. So you have the snow that's competing from the street, that's competing with the snow from the driveway. Maybe we could put up an image of in the summertime so we can sort of look at those spaces. The committee coordinator can find one that might be appropriate to look at.
First slide will be good, the very first one.
Yeah, one in the summer if possible, so we can sort of see what's left over. So you're suggesting underneath the tree, and I don't know how much you own to the right on this image. I assume it's probably halfway between the two units or something like that. So not a great deal there. So in essence, your driveway snow will go probably in the larger of the two areas, the one under the tree, I would assume, because you can't keep throwing it across the property line to your neighbor who's closer to you, where where the parking sign is. So I'm still struggling with where the snow from the street goes.
So if I can continue to respond, Mr. Wildman, we do have a significant amount of snow that goes there between the two properties. The city does come by from time to time during the winter to remove snow from the street. So what you saw in that snow slide was a year of particularly high accumulation. The city does remove periodically, otherwise there would be no on-street parking available for residents who have on-street parking in this area. So we do rely on the city removing their snow from the street, as well as managing that with the spaces that we have. And to date, we, based on what we saw from the two winters we have seen as owners of this house, that does appear to be manageable without impeding on either of our neighbors or forcing that snow into the street. And we would endeavor to keep it that way.
I appreciate that they do come and clear the roads. They have to. There's really no choice. You'd never get down the road if it was a heavy winter. But I guess the question is if they haven't cleared it, where's that snow going to go in order to get into your driveway? It's got to go somewhere, right? You're going to have to displace it if you want to continue using the driveway. And in that image, they hadn't yet displaced it. So if you were wanting to use your driveway in that case, that's the question I was driving at. So that's fine. You've adequately responded. I don't need specifics, but is there a mobility issue with the disability?
There's not a mobility issue with my son's disability. However, there's a mobility issue with my father-in-law, who's a senior and has arthritic knees. So he can't walk for a long distance, even in good conditions. But during the winter, it's even more problematic for him.
Okay, that's good enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wildman. Ms. McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for providing that detailed sketch for the parking at the front. I just want to revisit the parking at the rear. And I don't know if we could show that site plan again. It appears that I'll just maybe wait to see if the coordinator can pull that plan up again. It appears to me that the parking that's occurring as shown on the plan on the right-hand side, the two spaces behind 84 James the cars are parked in that right of way.
That's
So when
right.
we looked at the revised, or we looked at the reference plan, it showed the right-of-way access to the back of 86. And now this plan is showing that there, in actual fact, there's cars parked in that right-of-way. And I think perhaps it's a case of enforcing the legal right-of-way to access. So where you're showing 86 James's parking on this plan is not reflective of the way that was severed and the right-of-way is shown. Am I correct there, or is there?
Yes, I think you were correct, but probably that easement was from before, maybe before car parking time. And yes, and now they've made an arrangement with neighbors. They all work together, they move cars. So you can imagine if they enforce that right of way, then it would be very difficult for the others to park. And notice that the parking for 80 James and 82 is also, back there as well, sharing the right of way, laneway, and backing onto, they would be backing onto those right of ways if they could park there. So this has been an established pattern, I assume, for many years, that the way they're using it now.
Except it looks like 84 James has a front yard parking space, and then it's also got 2 cars at the back. So it's parking 3 cars, which may not respect the lawful right of way, and maybe more of an issue of having that enforced to provide proper access to the back of 86. But I'm just going to leave it at that.
Okay, I just wanted to add that, like, as I mentioned, 80 James, they don't have access either. They've built a fence and a deck going right across their rear yard. And 80 James has an agreement with 82 James to share their parking space. So right now, it's like those three semis, 3 halves of those semis are sharing that rear parking space. And I think, Derek would like to comment.
Thank you for your question, Ms. McLean. I'd also like to note that there are 2 mature trees on the existing established right-of-way. Were we to use those, we did have concerns from the forester who's with us today that any parking and transit could damage those trees, because we would have to transit over the critical route area. We've also approached our neighbors to try and establish whether there's some arrangement other than what is currently in place that would allow them to maintain parking for the 2 units that they have at 84 James. The conclusion we've come to, even in discussing with bylaw officers who were on site, was that if we were to enforce that right of way, we would effectively be displacing both parking spots available for 84 James at the rear of their property. So we're trying to come to a compromise here. Thank you.
However, if those parking spaces were displaced, they could park on the street since you're in a permit parking zone.
Yes.
Smith.
Or Derek could answer, but I had on an earlier slide a comment from the City of Ottawa website saying that it's not, you cannot get on-street parking permit if you have some rear parking space.
All right. We also had another one of the neighbors who wished to speak to this item. Ms. Malachewski at 82 James, I believe.
Hi, Mr. Chair. I have my partner as well, Chris Trevisano, who resides at the same address as me, who is on the screen next to me. I thought it might be useful as a neighbor who shares this driveway to make a few comments about the reality of parking behind. And it may be of use in this conversation to put up the image we were just looking at, which is the sketch, which had the view from above of all properties with the rights of way demarked. So while that is coming on the screen, so we live on the property at 82 James, so the other semi-detached on the other side of the driveway. Now, the image that you see here has 4 cars parked behind 84 and 82 James. The reality, in fact, is that there are not 4 cars there. It is possible to get 4 cars in there. I suppose if they were small vehicles, it is not feasible in reality. What really happens is that we have 1 car parked at the back of 82 James most of the time, which is the car that is parked closest to the 80 James property. And even with only 1 car parked there, for my neighbors at 86 James to be able to access the parking that's demonstrated in the back of their property, so away from the tree close to their property, they actually aren't able to get at it by going down and around as is indicated by the right of way. They have to go in behind. So they go between our existing deck and the cars and turn around on our property. And that is just because it is so hard to get in. And I think that might be something that is a little bit lost in this when we look at these sketches that come from quite a long time ago. And obviously we weren't driving the kind of cars that we are now. So just wanted to add some to some color to sort of the day-to-day reality. The day-to-day reality is I watch Derek and Lee Sung coming into their property many times a day. I'm currently on mat leave. We've got windows on the side of the house. I see this all the time, and there really is no way for them to get in there besides turning around behind our house. So we really are talking about a difficulty of access, a difficult to access parking spot, even more so than I think had been conveyed previously.
Yeah, it's incredibly hard to maneuver back there. I'd love for you to give it a shot sometime. It's very difficult for anyone trying to park back there. I guess the point to the questions of legal rights of way and whether you enforce them or not, I mean, I don't know that these legal rights of way give anyone the right to drive over each other's property. I think those rights of way go back far enough that they probably don't contemplate cars. So if we were all to enforce the actual legal rights associated with those rights of way, we'd bar all of each other from being able to park back there. I'd say to my neighbor, nope, you can't take your car on my property, which of course is necessary to access back there. And they'd say to me, nope, you can't take a car on my property because you don't have a right of way to bring a car over it. And you can't park back there. So I think that the matter needs to actually be looked at through the lens of practicalities and not a question of the strict actual, legal property rights associated with the rights of way. Because if we do that, then we get to ourselves to a point where no one's parking back there, and that's obviously not desirable from your policy perspective, because then you've got 5 new cars potentially looking for street parking, which isn't going to help anyone in the neighborhood.
And to just round out our comments, I just wanted to add as well, it's very important to us that the trees that are there be maintained. We've already lost trees in the most recent storm. And as you know, with the climate emergency that we're living in, it is important to have trees, and it improves our quality of life, cuts down on heating costs of homes, all sorts of things. It's good and important to have the trees for practical and environmental reasons. And so we hate to lose those trees at the back of 86 James if they needed to park at the very rear of their property. And similarly, if the residents of 86 James were able to park in front of their property as they are now seeking the right to do, we would then be able to use the back of our property as we had hoped to when we purchased the property. So, we have a deck at the moment, and there's a large paved area that is used to turn the car around at the moment. If that car was not parking in the back, they would need to turn their car around, and we could make use of our property fully as well. So there's sort of the application is obviously being made specifically for a parking spot for the residents of 86 James, but it stands to benefit the residents who share that driveway as well. Thank you very much for listening to us, and we're here to answer any questions you might have with respect to the experience of the neighbors on this property.
How long have you lived in the property, ma'am?
We've lived here for almost 2 years.
Okay. So what's it like in the winter with snowfall? What do you do with the snow that's back there?
Yeah, so the neighbors have a joint agreement. So we basically have a snow removal company and we all contribute to it. And the snow removal company comes down the driveway and basically places the snow in sort of 2 locations. And it is a little bit dependent on who's residing there at the time. The property between ours and Derek and Lee Sung's is a property that is rented out. So, you know, the vehicles in the back change depending on the tenants, but the 80 James property is entirely blocked. So there's no parking behind there. So that's the main place that snow goes. Then there's sort of an area along the back of the fence of our property that snow goes in. Our neighbor at 80 James parks on our property. We don't have a car, so that gives a little bit more room for snow. So where we would otherwise put a car, sometimes there's snow if there's heavy fall there. And then there's also snow sort of at the back of 84 and 86 that gets placed. So really we're doing our best. It's hard to find place for snow. I'm not going to suggest otherwise, but basically what happens is they come down the driveway and they put it where cars don't try to park.
You can also have it removed.
Yes, we're fortunate that hasn't been necessary yet, but certainly that would be something to explore if there really was a need, but fortunately with the number of cars back there at the moment, it hasn't been.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wilder, question, comment?
Ms. Malachevsky, what is the situation like on the street overnight? I mean, you lived there now 2 years as well. You're supporting this application. What is the situation on the street at the moment? I mean, I noticed like during the day, I just happened to I had an appointment on Kent and I was near James Street. So I just happened to go up and actually it was a line of cars parked right on the line of the street. That's during the day. What's it like in the overnight on the street?
I think it's probably fairly comparable. We have a little bit more traffic during the day, both because there's a daycare on the street and because of our proximity to bank. So I think people do park. They make use of the parking on the street, perhaps a bit more during the day. There's street parking generally in the neighborhood. I don't want to suggest that there isn't, and certainly. I'm not able to speak to what it's like to try to find a parking spot on the street because I don't have a car and I don't do that. But when we do have guests, they are able to find a spot. Obviously, they are able to find a spot for an hour only because that's the parking availability if you don't have a permit. So presumably, that's where the rubber hits the road for our neighbors who are looking for parking for longer than that and would need a permit for that, which I understand they haven't been able to obtain.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weldon. Ms. McLean.
Could I just have the coordinator put up the draft reference plan or the reference plan that shows the right of way? I just want to get a better sense of that area at the back. Can we go to the reference plan, the one that showed the right of way? I think it was marked in yellow there. Yeah. So the right of way that exists goes towards the back and then across the back of 84 into 86. And then you could park at the rear of that deck, I guess. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there's a right of way over that part 7 and they can back up. So yeah. Do you know if you have a right of way over the part 7 on this plan or at the rear of 82?
Yes,
I'm not sure if the question is for myself, but we have one half of part 7, the 82 James part of it, and there is no right away over our property. But as I mentioned, it's practically impossible to park in their spot without doing it. So we obviously let them come over our property to turn around. It wouldn't be possible otherwise.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Wilder, further comment? Okay, any other questions or comments from the members of the panel? Okay. All right. The department is objecting. They're in opposition to this application. I believe the planner on this file is Mr. Hamilton. Mr. Hamilton, please.
That is correct, Mr. Chair. We are in opposition to the variances being requested. The proposed front yard parking space does deviate from the streetscape character analysis and the elements that we find on the street, the ones that are legally permitted, because we are only able to count legally established front yard parking spaces in the SCA.
Your position hasn't changed.
It has not.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you.
All right. Any final comments, Ms. Smith?
I believe Derek has some comments. I think I did show that we are meeting with the streetscape character. I'm sorry, Craig, but I don't agree with the city's position. Thank you.
Mr. Armstrong, briefly.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just wish to make a statement as I did at our last presentation. Thank you very much again to you and your colleagues for hearing our case today. As you know, we recently moved downtown to join the Centertown community and to contribute to its variety of life and culture. We've connected with many of the families on James Street, and I'd like to thank them for being with us today to support our application. As you've heard, we have many family responsibilities, especially with 3 children at 3 different schools. There are medical appointments for our Lisong's parents, geotherapy for my deaf and autistic son, and unplanned transport to school when the buses aren't running, which we've seen as a frequent situation. We also have a right to have safe and reliable access to our vehicle in order to fulfill these responsibilities. Your approval would ensure that we aren't walking our parents down icy sidewalks for blocks in the winter or risking our children getting out into oncoming traffic on James Street. As you've heard today, there isn't enough room to navigate or park safely at the back of our home when our neighbors are parked there. It was designed before cars existed. If we try to do so, we'll be in a constant fight with our neighbors or displace them to the street. Letting us park in front of our house won't have any meaningful impact on what the street looks like now. The residents of nearly every single family or semi-detached home on James Street, as you saw, park in front of their homes or on their driveways near the sidewalk. We're just asking for the same treatment, but we're asking to do so legally, whether or not our neighbors' parking is legal. We went through this process because it really matters to our daily life. It's costly. It required a lot of effort to get here to do this right. All the city officials who did come to see our parking also agreed and sympathized with us that we don't have proper access to our parking, even the bylaw officer who was here. It is a really difficult situation. The relief that you grant us today is the last step for us to integrate safely into our new neighborhood and to enhance the long-term livability of our home. So thank you very much.
One final question. I'm looking at the notice of violation you received from the from bylaw. How come it took you from the 29th of May last year until now to bring this before committee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's actually an excellent question. We've actually been trying to resolve this question since we received the notice of violation in January of 2021. As you know, at the time, we were at the height of COVID lockdowns and restrictions. We also did engage with the right-of-way planning organization within the city on the advice of bylaw to find out what next steps were and how to resolve this situation. So in fact, we've been working with the city for a year and a half to try and resolve this with many instances of good advice from the city, but also instances where we didn't hear back for a couple of months at a time. We also were required to conduct a full site survey of our home, which, as you understand from your experience, does take, in some cases, many weeks, in our case, several months. So we brought this forward as soon as we could be prepared to give you an application that would fully air the issues around this difficulty, and we appreciate your consideration here.
And who gave you the advice to take your issue to the Committee of Adjustment?
So the right-of-way, I'm not sure if he's a planner, but Mr. Peter Grunstra with the city noted that we would not be able to simply apply for a right-of-way and get a depressed curb as the bylaw officer had recommended to us, but that in fact we would be required to pursue a minor variance application, after which they could consider our a right-of-way application to get a depressed curb.
All right. Thank you very much. No further questions comments from the panel. I think we're going to reserve on this, ladies and gentlemen. And our decision will be in your hands within 10 days. Thank you very much for your input.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
And with that, we conclude this this hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the City of Ottawa, and we'll be back 3 weeks. We will now move to the reserve hearing. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.